Okay, the first bill up tonight is 5447 by Representative Rosario.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to the committee. I appreciate going first. We have someone testifying tonight who's going to catch a 6:30 flight, so I think she's going to make it. So thank you so much. H547 before you is the Biodiesel Heating Oil Act of 2019. Currently, Rhode Island law has a 5% blend of biodiesel with heating oil. It's been a very successful program since 2017, and the fuel terminals provide the blended fuel. The bill proposes to raise this to 2% in 2020 and then stopping at 19% by 2026. The heating oil distributors want more biodiesel because it's their argument against natural gas. The biodiesel is actually cleaner than natural gas, and it's blended at about 17%. The oil industry trying to be clean and green. The Rhode Island Oil Institute, who we hear from tonight, which represents the heating oil distributors, is also in favor of this. So what's the reason for it? Well, because the blend is to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It's all part of the Rhode Island Resiliency Act. The current 5% blend that we have here in Rhode Island has actually reduced gas emissions 90,000 tons of CO2, which is about equivalent to 15,000 cars coming off the road a year. So we will have a sub-A on this. My understanding is the oil industry would like to make two slight changes. One is they'd like to delay the start of this bill, the 7% to 2021, and then we'd like to see the increments to 10% in 2023, 15% in 2025, and 20% in 2027. And that's so the terminals can logistically meet these requirements, and we're all the stakeholders are fine with that. The other change, which we're also cool with, is on page 3, line 20. They want to add the words "or unavailable." So they want to be able to cover themselves with biodiesel is not available, maybe because of a weather event, or there's a large strike, something that the terminals just have no control over. And I think it's a good idea. And honestly, we didn't think of it when we drafted it. So again, we have working on this for a few years, good consensus from the Rhode Island Oil Institute, which represents the heating oil distributors in Rhode Island, the New England Fuel Institute, several of the terminal operators, and the National Biodiesel Board, and a number of environmental groups. So I want to thank all of these groups for working together, for their support. As I say, it's taken a few years, so this is a big deal. And I also want to thank all of you for listening. I'm happy to answer any questions if I can, or I will defer to the experts with whom I've worked, because I am no expert, I'm just a connector. Thank you very much.
Any questions? Speaker?
We have to press, there we go. I think this is a fantastic bill. I remember when we previously adopted the bill to bring it to the current standards. What we have seen is how this has really helped out, particularly in the restaurant industry. There was a young girl who we had up at the State House a number of years ago, who's now in college, Cassandra Lynn, who worked with me and worked with the folks from, I think it was Newport Biodiesel, in order to get her dream of getting restaurants to start doing this. And now it's been so successful. Of course, we've heard for a while where some of the restaurants, people were stealing. They used cooking oil in order to make their own biodiesel in order to run their diesel vehicles. So I think this is great. I think this is going to be good for the long term of the state, for the health and the welfare of the people. And with so many people here in the state of Rhode Island that rely on home heating oil, this makes good sense to encourage even a larger use of biodiesel in the furnaces. And I'm assuming it should not have an impact on the furnaces because of the way it's blended.
Thank you very much for that. And thanks for reminding everyone how important it is to use the old cooking oil, which is part of the biofuel product. So thank you. And Bob Morton is here from Newport Biodiesel as well. He can talk specifically about that transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative.
Okay.
Any other questions, Bob? Can we recognize Representative McAdoo, as being here.
Mr. Chair, thank you, members of the committee. Sir, if you're ever available for any of my next testimony, I would definitely look forward to hiring you. I said if you're available for hire for running my next testimony, you did a much better job of that than I did. Thank you.
Oh, you did a great job. Thank you. And thank you for introducing it.
So again, Mr. Chair, this is House Bill 5446, which is an amendment to the Energy Facility Siting Act, which is the enabling legislation for the Energy Facility Siting Commission. Energy Facility Siting Commission. And their role is the primary overseers of whether or not a power plant should be built within the state of Rhode Island. And this legislation itself comes out from a request from the town of Borough, which I represent, and was put together by two very well-informed attorneys. And they took not only the legislation that was passed, I believe, a year ago by this body, which would also amended the enabling legislation, but also took into account all of the testimony that was provided by the study commission that was held along with the legislation that was eventually introduced last year. Every member of this committee who was in the chambers last session voted for this legislation as it was introduced 2 years ago, and I would hope that you would support it again. The importance of this legislation, in my mind, is it has been since April of 2016 that we've been dealing with the current project. Our laws and regulations are designed to allow for an efficient, quick process for any kind of land development, both to the benefit of the developer and to the people in the communities that these particular developments are proposed in. This legislation starts the process to streamline what's going on. As of right now, the only folks that are benefiting from the process we have in place now, quite frankly, the attorneys. There's plenty of stakeholders in this state that just are getting dragged on and dragged on and dragged on. The emotional state this is putting through everybody in Rhode Island right now is just unbelievable. And what I'm hoping is that this committee looks at this legislation and sees the wisdom in amending this particular act so that future projects just don't get drawn out like this. I mean, the amount of money and the waste of time that has gone on for the last 3 years is just unbelievable. And I would hope in your wisdom that you would consider the passage of this legislation. With your permission, Mr. Chair, I'd like to introduce Senator De La Cruz and also a delegation from the town of Burrillville who are also here to speak on this legislation. So first I'll introduce Senator De La Cruz, Senate 23, who is sponsoring the Senate companion to this legislation.
Sure thing. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Chairperson and members of the committee. As Representative Clay said, I am a senator for Senate District 23. It's Burrillville, Gloucester, and North Smithfield. And I've submitted a companion bill on the Senate side. And these proposed updates for the Energy Facility Siting Act would increase public participation, municipal participation, and environmental protection. It would be expanding the board from 3 to 7 members for large energy projects and ensure compliance during construction and operation. I'm not going to talk any further about it because the town and the attorneys are going to really go deeper into what it does and can answer questions like that.
Any questions for any witnesses? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Our next witness will be Jerry Elmer from the Conservation Law Foundation.
Mr. Chair, if it would please the committee.
Oh, you want to go with your...
Well, I was going to say the town of Burrillville, unfortunately, is spending a lot of money on their particular events, and so I've asked that we can bring them.
Yeah, they're not on my list though, so they should have signed up, but go ahead.
All right, I appreciate that. I'd like to introduce Town Council President, Town of Burrillville,
Oh, all right.
John Pacheco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here tonight. I was part of John Pacheco, Borough Council President. I was part of that study commission last year that the speaker put together to study this legislation. It's essentially the same thing. It's time to get this passed. It doesn't just affect Burrillville, it affects every city and town. The town of Burrillville is well into 7 figures vetting the project that we have on the plate right now, and that just is not fair to any taxpayer to have to spend that kind of money to vet a private project. So I appreciate the time, and our attorneys are here who have drawn up this legislation, have been working on it for 3 years. If you have any questions about it, they're here to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who's going to be up next?
Leah Donaldson is the primary author of the legislation as it's been submitted.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate everyone giving us this opportunity. My name is Leah Donaldson. I'm here with my partner, Michael McElroy. We're special counsel for the town of Burrillville, and we obviously strongly support the passage of this bill. This bill amends the legislation that created the Energy Facility Siting Board, which we call the EFSB. The EFSB has sole and unilateral authority to grant or deny permits for major energy facilities in Rhode Island. This includes power generating facilities, which we all know about, but it also includes natural gas distribution piping, it includes electric transmission lines, and it includes electric substations. The EFSB permitting process affects every town and city in Rhode Island. The EFSB enabling legislation, as it currently exists, it was enacted over 30 years ago. It's currently outdated and it's inadequate for what we need as a state. Right now, public participation is limited. City and town resolutions supporting or opposing a facility can be ignored. The state environmental goals are not prioritized. Incomplete applications can be accepted, which creates unnecessary expense and delays while stakeholders and agencies pursue essential information from an applicant. Those cities and towns can be excluded due to budgetary concerns. Regulatory enforcement options for existing energy facilities are limited. And this bill will improve the EFSB permitting process in many ways. As was mentioned, last year the House passed a similar bill. And of course, prior to that, there was the Special Legislative Commission. The current bill that you have in front of you is, we began with the language that passed last year, and we have introduced additional aspects that were concerns that were brought up during the Special Legislative Commission. So we wanted to make sure, for example, there were some state agencies that had certain concerns that weren't addressed in last year's bill, and we have integrated as much of that language as we possibly can to bring in, to solve the issues that were brought up, for example, by the state agencies and other folks on the commission. Let's see. So, as it was already mentioned, this bill creates a faster permitting process. This bill creates a pre-application process that's similar to any major land development, and it creates a review for the application to make sure that it's complete prior to docketing. It strengthens environmental protections. It makes sure that cumulative environmental impacts are considered. It also increases public participation. It creates more opportunity for public participation, and as was suggested by our state agencies last year, it creates a council for the public to participate in a formal capacity to protect the public and to protect the environment. The bill supports participation of cities and towns. It makes the EFSB consider anything put forth by cities and towns, whether they oppose it or whether they support it. It evaluates whether a proposed facility meets the host community's comprehensive plan, and it ensures the host community has a meaningful role, while at the same time it leaves the sole authority to grant or deny a permit with the EFSB. This bill creates dual tracks for small projects versus large projects. This was something else that was introduced last year as part of the Sub-A.
Energy, there's very few of them. So the vast majority of the projects that they look at are projects that relate to transmission lines. And transmission lines are in no way the same manner, the same level of size and scope as a major gas-fired multi-megawatt electric generation facility. So we've got a variety of issues, costs to our consumers, costs to our ratepayers, because of notice provisions and public hearings and requirements. We go and we provide the public hearings and virtually nobody shows up. Because it's a transmission distribution process, not anything related to what we're talking about. So we've got pretty significant concerns, similar concerns to what we testified last year. This bill's a little bit better than it was last year. However, we remain opposed, and at this point, I'd be happy to take any questions if I'm able to answer them, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions, Representative Walsh?
Thank you. I can tell. I just have a couple of questions about some of the footnotes in your testimony. Particularly number 2 and 3 on the second page. Number 2 being that the EFSB currently conducts its hearings at Jefferson Boulevard. The dais comfortably accommodates 3 persons and could perhaps accommodate 4 or 5. However, with a 9-member board, arrangements and funding would have to be made for a larger hearing. That one just seems a little on the small side. I feel like chairs are probably not that
I was not the author of this letter.
No problem. And then number 3, has scheduled more than, EFSB has scheduled more than 20 hearings, 20 days of final hearings, although some hearings may start later and early. The typical full-day hearings at EFSB start at 9:30 a.m. and continue until 4 p.m. or later. As you can see by the number of people here, it doesn't seem to affect them at all. They seem to be totally fine with coming in and participating on their own time. I know that the concern voiced up here, which the footnote was attending to, was that it's such long hours that we might not be able to find people who are even interested in participating. That's another one that I just don't.
In addition to that, the conflict of people who then are from the community, then the community has the ability to intervene. So it's a very cumbersome process as it's drafted. So in addition to the footnotes, there's lots of explanation about what it is we're trying to get at. I didn't draft that particular letter, but those are the concerns that the company has.
Sure, and
that's a list of
our goal as the committee is always to try to marry the voices between the opposition and the support. And so I'm hoping by clarifying these that if we realize that maybe they're not huge obstacles to getting us all on the same page, that maybe that would be a step in the right direction. Which brings us to the next one that says, the House bill does not specify how the EFSB would proceed. There were multiple communities, with some in favor of and some opposed to the project. And if you look on page 5, within the bill itself, it has the specifications for what happens if there are multiple host committees. Again, I'm not trying to shoot you down. It's mostly just that I think there's more that we agree on than that we don't, and that those particular ones may not necessarily be as relevant now.
That may very well be, and like I said, in situations relating to a transmission line and equating that down to a power plant of the size of what we're talking about, they're apples and oranges, mushrooms and oranges, or apples, or whatever it is we're talking to. So there probably is more commonality. There probably is some way we weren't involved in any of the communicating in the conversations because we're happy to, but that's where we are at this point.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions for the board? From the board, I should say. I just have one for you, Mr. McQueen, if you don't mind. Have you been in touch with Ms. Donaldson to try and set up a meeting between the groups?
I have not. You might
As National Grid.
have talked to Mike Ryan. I'm not sure if you have Michael or not. Yeah.
Yes, no? No.
Doesn't believe so.
Well, then I would suggest that, if there's smaller details that you want to have amended, that you get together and see if we can hash it out. We can always do a survey here to make sure that it's a better bill and it's going to benefit everybody, including the communities.
Certainly.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. McQueen. All right, next up is going to be Amy Moses for the Conservation Law Foundation. Is she? Yes, thank you.
Thanks so much, members of the committee. My name is Amy Moses. I'm the Vice President and Rhode Island Director of the Conservation Law Foundation, the environmental advocacy organization. We have quite a bit of experience at the EFSB. My colleague Jerry Elmer, who's here with me today, is our lead attorney in the case involving the proposed fracked gas and fossil fuel power plant in Burrville that we strongly oppose. So he has spent an inordinate amount of time in that case. In addition, I served on the House Study Commission that looked at the EFSB, and it was really a great study commission. We had a number of witnesses, including Attorney Donaldson. There was a lot of information shared. A number of other states have energy facility siting boards. Consulting groups have done reports analyzing what works, what doesn't work. As was already said, our siting board statute is about 30 years old, and it is in need of an update. Attorney Donaldson did a great job summarizing the bill, so I just want to make 3 quick points. First of all, this legislation is prospective. This would not in any way, shape, or form affect what is going on in Burrville right now. That plant is going to continue under the existing law. So I want to make sure everyone's clear about that. This new law that passed would affect future projects, not ones that are underway. Second, something that's really great about this bill is that it refers to the Resilient Rhode Island Act, which contains our goals for reducing carbon emissions. And we think that's really important that that is considered in citing future energy projects. We don't want future energy projects cited if they're going to prevent us from reaching our climate goals. And third, there is a provision in this bill to create a position called Counsel for the Public, and that is something that Conservation Law Foundation advocated for. The language in this bill, as in last year's bill, was based on the New Hampshire statute, and that really gives the public a voice at the table. Among other things, that Counsel for the Public has to consider environmental justice issues. So those are 3 things I wanted to highlight. We support the bill, and we think it's important that it be reformed. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for this witness? No, thank you very much, Ms. Moses. Next we have Doug Levinsky from TEC-RI is against the bill, but with written testimony only. Next up will be, what do we call, Paul Roselli from the Burrville Land Trust.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Paul Roselli from the Burrville Land Trust tonight. I'm also representing the Rhode Island Association of Conservation Commissions. And here's what this bill does. In essence, House Bill 5446 provides an opportunity that makes Rhode Island ready and open for business. That's what it does. It streamlines the process. It gets local control back into the game. It provides a level playing field between the alternatives and the business as usual model of fossil fuels. This bill makes Rhode Island open for business for new technologies. Let's face it, we can't go back to the past. The new 21st century infrastructure is where we need to be. And let's face it, anyone who comes to Rhode Island, invests in Rhode Island, needs predictable, reliable regulatory structures. And that's what this bill does. It streamlines the process for investors wanting clarity in emissions control when investing in Rhode Island. And it does one other thing that other legislation doesn't do. And let's be clear, over the past couple of days, within the House alone, there's been close to 246 pieces of legislation. No other bill than this one actually looks to the future. That's what it does. It provides a new language of how to interpret where we are today and where we need to go. It listens to health organizations. It relies on social justice groups and includes them in the process of this gas infrastructure development. Gives opportunities for direct input from the labor unions. When you've got 7 people on a committee, and 2 of those are from a host community, engineers, local labor unions, whatever it is, have an opportunity to have a direct seat on this council that we'll have to provide more chairs for. The IBEW, carpenters, painters, and other groups within the impacted community now have an opportunity, a direct opportunity, to be on that board. You know, my colleagues here today will talk about all of the other benefits of this particular bill. There's one here that maybe doesn't get mentioned, but should. And that's it, and that's that this bill is modeled after other pieces of legislation in other New England states. We're trying to play catch-up. This bill was modeled in part from the New Hampshire bill, which pays for people on the board. If you can imagine someone who would love to be on the board but works a 9-to-5 job and the hearings start at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, there is no way on earth that they are going to be able to be on that board. This bill provides for funds so they can get paid a little stipend so that there's some incentive for anyone in a host community to be on that board. Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee, I've submitted 2 pieces of written testimony. One is pretty much a translation of a summary of what the bill says. And the other one are these bullet points that I'm talking about today. The last one is probably the most important one. And that is, we've been here before. Last year at this time, this bill made it through this committee, sailed through this committee, got through the House unanimously voted for it. It got to the Senate. And it's important to realize that once it got into the Senate, a sub-A was produced. And compromising language was put back into the House, and a sub-AA was produced too. So many of you were here during that time. What I'm asking you to do is to go back in time and look at that legislation. You'll find some very, very good additions to it, produced by Attorney Donaldson and other state and other agencies within both the nonprofit world and the state agency world. And last but not least, Mr. Chairman and committee members, we need to look to the future. This bill starts the process of developing a new language in a warmer world. This uses that engagement to move our jobs and economy away from fossil fuels and towards energy production and energy efficiency. We don't have a choice. And this bill gets us to where we need to be. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members, for your indulgence.
Is there any questions for this witness? Seeing none, Mr. Roselli, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Next up is going to be, looks like Nicole DiPaolo. She left. Thank you. Mary Pendergast.
She left. I think she left, yeah.
She left also? Well, I'll keep her on the list in case she is outside. We'll just go to Elizabeth Seaver. Is Elizabeth here?